Part 33. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 321. Lin En passed on the skills to these people very quickly. After nearly a minute, these countless skills appeared in the minds of those who were suitable for practicing this skill. The moment the chosen people get the exercises, they will subconsciously sit on the ground and start to accept the exercises in books. Lin En withdrew his gaze from these people, turned his head and looked at Dao Yi behind him. He said calmly, "Dao Yi, I am just passing on to them the exercises that are most suitable for their cultivation. But there are many other techniques that they can still practice, but they haven't mastered them yet. I will leave all these techniques with you. Then just watch the distribution and let them all try their best to become stronger. You're in charge of them, and they leave it to you." Dao Yi's expression became extremely serious when Lin En said these words. He looked at Lin seriously, his eyes full of respect. After nodding heavily to Lin En, Dao Yi patted his chest hard and answered loudly, "Don't worry, Chief Lin. I will try my best to lead this army to become stronger." Lin En, on the other hand, just nodded his head slightly towards Dao, and then raised his left hand. The index finger of his left hand slowly stretched out and casually touched Dao Yi's forehead. The next moment, an extremely large amount of various knowledge about the fairy age, including techniques, formations, and the cultivation experience of some powerful people, all poured into Dao Yi's head without reservation. Dao Yi's mind felt like it was going to explode at this moment, and a strong feeling of swelling and pain kept rising. In such a huge amount of information, there are many techniques that even he, a native of the fairy age, has never heard of. 2 seconds later, Lin retracted his fingers and looked elsewhere calmly. At this time, Dao Yi still closed his eyes tightly, accepting the inheritance from Lin En's mind, which was as vast as the sea. He couldn't help but whispered, So many. Chief Lin En actually. In such a short time. So many techniques have been instilled in me. Even the legendary places of inheritance. It is impossible to instill so much information into other people's minds in an instant. This method is simply too terrible. And Chief Lin En's handiwork is too big. He actually used so many techniques. Let his army practice to know the techniques here. Even in the age of fairies, if you take out a book at random, it will be a skill that will be competed by many people. And there are even some techniques. The value is unique. But at this moment, Chief Lin En provided everything to everyone selflessly. Such character. There is simply no one who can match it. Thinking of this, Dao Yi couldn't help but use all his strength to accept what he got from Lin En. At the same time, those people before them also closed their eyes tightly, comprehending the technique that existed in their minds. It was not until 5 minutes later that Dao Yi finally absorbed all the techniques that Lin En had thrown at him. While rubbing his head, which was a little stuffy due to swelling and pain, he slowly opened his eyes and looked directly at Lin En. In Dao Yi's sight, the sense of respect and admiration became more intense than before. He bowed heavily to Lin En and said with a grateful tone, "Sir Lin, thank you." Dao Yi was very grateful to Lin En in his heart. The meaning of these skills to him, as the only survivor of the fairy era, was different from that of anyone else. Now when Lin En passed this information to him, his heart, which was still a little empty and uneasy, completely settled down at this moment. Lin En stretched out his hand, used 2 fingers to gently support Dao Yi's forehead, which was pointed at the ground, and said with a slight smile, "You don't have to. Just don't let me down." Dao Yi slowly straightened up and nodded heavily to Lin En again. Immediately afterwards, Lin En spoke again. "Dao Yi, I'm leaving here first. After they wake up, you can just take them to practice. When I finish the next thing, I will start to create an environment more suitable for cultivation. Before that, it's all up to you." After saying that, Lin An didn't wait for Dao's reply and started directly, tearing open a space channel. After taking one step inside, he disappeared from here. When Lin An appeared again, he came to a deserted high mountain in the Kyushu territory. After looking around the lonely environment, Lin An sighed softly and said, "Now it's time to start building another one. Belong to my army completely." When Lin An was in the universe, looking at the Juzhu domain and selecting talents, he put 2 different soul marks on the selected talents. And those who were selected to practice the immortal age skills were all people who were marked with the first soul mark. Lin An slowly closed his eyes and began to sense the second soul mark that belonged to him. And at this time, at the Tree of Life, those who were selected also woke up from the state of closed eyes and perception one by one. And there were waves of exclamations that rose and fell randomly. It's amazing. There is actually such a practice method, which is completely different from the way I practiced before. Lord Lin An is so powerful, he can even get something that I have never heard of. Is there anything in this world that Lord Lin An can't do? Dai looked at these soldiers who belonged to him, and a solemn meaning flashed in his eyes. Huh. After taking a deep breath, he shouted loudly. "Everyone listen up. From now on, enter the state of cultivation. You don't want to disappoint Commander Lin An's efforts." After hearing Dai's words, the soldiers stood up one by one, looking at Dai with a firm gaze. Then Dai walked towards the group of soldiers and continued to shout. "We are all members of Commander Lin An's command. We can't embarrass Commander Lin An." The soldiers also made a decision in their hearts. Under Dai's guidance, they all entered the state of cultivation. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 322. Found it? At the same time, Lin An had already sensed all the second soul imprints engraved on him. When the engraving was done previously, Lin didn't pay attention. Only now did he realize that there were exactly 10,000 people who were imprinted by him for the second time. 10,000. The quantity is just right. After whispering, Lin An once again activated the power of space law. The space channel that had appeared once before in the entire Juzhu domain appeared once again in front of those 10,000 people. What the previous space channel represented had been publicized by some proud soldiers. This news was immediately known to most people. Now everyone who saw the second space passage appearing in front of them felt intense excitement. Oh my God! Does Mr. Lin take a fancy to me? Great! I also have the opportunity to become Lord Lin's subordinate. Ha ha ha! These 10,000 people entered the space channel without any hesitation. After entering, the first thing you see is darkness, but the next second, light emerges. These 10,000 people came to the deserted environment where Lin An was at the same time. At this moment, Lin An looked at these 10,000 people. The second wave of people he selected all had 2 characteristics in common. The first characteristic is that everyone's talents are very high, and they are no less talented than the 100 supernovas in the Kyushu region. The second characteristic is that they are all under the age of 15, and none of them have awakened their destiny wheels. They are a group of children with extremely high plasticity. After the children appeared here, the first thing they did was to look at Lin An. Every childish face is filled with excitement. Lin An looked at the scene and couldn't help but shook his head and sighed. Kids will still be kids after all. The army he wants to build is not an army composed of innocent children. What Lin An wants is an extremely powerful cold-blooded army. In this army, innocence and mercy are absolutely not allowed to exist. He frowned and said in a cold tone. All 10,000 of you are very talented. I selected you among the vast crowd. I will personally train you and make you the strongest army in the 9 provinces. But I will not force you. You can choose on your own whether to stay in this army or to leave from this army. After Lin An finished speaking, no one responded for a long time. They all looked at Lin An with admiration. After being quiet for nearly a minute, a cute little girl with long blonde hair and blue eyes raised her hand and asked Lin En. Master Lin En, can we really become the strongest army in the Kyushu region as you say? Our life wheels haven't awakened yet. Lin En looked at the little girl who looked like a doll, and said in a cold tone. I said yes. That's fine. The turquoise blue eyes of the little blonde girl couldn't help but widen, and the small mouth on her immature face opened uncontrollably. Ming, understand. This, is this Lord Lin? His self-confidence is so strong. I have never seen anyone so confident. On TV, in books. Never seen it before. A confident person like Mr. Lin. Until the end, no one chose to leave. They all know that staying in Lin's army is a great thing. Once you leave, you will regret it for life. Lin En looked at these children and slowly said. Since no one chose to leave, I assume that you all chose to stay. After saying this, Lin paused immediately, and then looked around among the 10,000 children. Then he spoke again. I need to choose a person in charge among you. But I don't know anything about you. Therefore, I only have one selection method. All the children's attention was attracted by Lin En. They looked at Lin En very curiously, waiting for Lin En to tell him this method. Lin En did not delay any further. After raising his brows slightly, he spoke directly. So fight each other. The person standing at the end will become the leader of this army. As he spoke, Lin stretched out a hand and grabbed it hard in the void. In an instant, the positions of these 10,000 people were completely disrupted, and there was also a space barrier that enveloped them. Lin En looked at the children in this space without any expression on his face. He knew very well that only by going through countless battles could the immaturity of these children be completely washed away. After the children in the space experienced a series of inner struggles, a battle finally broke out among themselves. This group of children only have powerful talents, but they are just ordinary people at present. The fight between them is just like a fight between ordinary children. The fight lasted for a long time, and even a desolate night rain fell in the sky, and the ground was soaked. When the battle between 10,000 children ended, the one who stood at the end was the blonde girl who asked Lin En questions before. Even Lin En did not expect that the one who stood at the end would be such a weak-looking little girl. Lin En could not help but bend the corners of his mouth a little, and said with a chuckle. Interesting. He waved his hand gently, dispersed the space, and walked towards the little girl. At this time, there were many scars on the little girl's body, broken teeth, swollen face, and bloody arms. Lin En walked in front of the little girl, and the little girl looked up at Lin En, and said in a very weak voice. Master Lin En. I won. Looking at the little girl's somewhat stubborn appearance, Lin En nodded gently, and asked with a smile in his tone. What's your name? The little girl replied. My name is Helen. Lin En stretched out a hand and gently touched Helen's head. At the same time, the power of the law of life violently penetrated from Lin En's body and poured into Helen's body. In an instant, the wounds on Helen's body healed at a strange speed. The broken teeth grew back, the swollen face returned to its original state in an instant, the blood on the arm that was flowing with blood disappeared instantly, and the wounds were no longer there. Even the fatigue in Helen's body disappeared at this moment. It seemed that the tragic battle just now was like a dream. Feeling her current physical condition, Helen was a little dumbfounded. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 323. Helen lowered her head and looked at the wounds on her body. But at this moment, those wounds were completely healed, and even the pain that kept rising disappeared. It was as if the fierce battle just now had never happened, just like a dream. She couldn't help but widen her blue eyes, and said in a very puzzled tone. I'm fine. What's going on? Such a serious injury. It was healed so quickly? Clearly, the previous second, it felt like I might faint at any time. But the next second, it was like nothing happened. Lord Lin's power. It's too magical. Not only is his fighting ability terrifying, even his healing ability is so powerful. Even the goddess of life in film and television stories. It wouldn't be as easy as Lord Lin to treat a seriously injured person. Lord Lin. So powerful. In her little heart, there was only fanatical worship for Lin En. Even if Lin En asked her to die now, she would do it without hesitation. At this moment, Helen completely became Lin En's little fangirl. After healing Helen's injuries with the law of life, Lin En looked from Helen's body to the children lying on the ground around her, one by one covered with scars. These children were suffering from great pain at the moment, one by one with hideous faces covering their wounds, and their bodies rolled on the ground. After looking around, the will of heaven in Lin En's body started to run wildly again, and the luster in his eyes became brighter. Law of life. The law of life was once again activated, constantly seeping out of Lin En's body, and the power fluctuations of the law of life spread rapidly in this world. The world where the power of the law of life spread had undergone tremendous changes. The gloomy sky suddenly became bright, the dripping rain stopped in an instant, and the soaked earth returned to its original appearance. At the same time, in just an instant, the 9,999 children, except Helen, were all wrapped in the law of life. The bodies with serious wounds began to heal quickly. The power consumed in the body was refilled again in the blink of an eye. The children who were weak and could not stand on the ground stood up one by one. They widened their eyes, their pupils were full of disbelief, and they looked at their bodies seriously. This dreamlike thing made them a little unbelievable for a while. What happened? All the wounds on my body disappeared. What a magical power! I didn't even have time to react, and I was healed by that magical power. Master Lin is so powerful. He seems to be able to do anything. There are 10,000 people. All of them were healed in an instant. You are worthy of Master Lin. Everyone's eyes were focused on Lin at this moment. When Lin realized that the injuries on the children's bodies had all recovered, he prepared to proceed to the next item. He raised his hand and waved it casually, dispersing all the laws of life that were fluctuating in the surrounding heaven and earth. He looked at the group of children standing nearby with a calm look, and said calmly, "Helen, organize them to line up." Helen nodded heavily, and replied with a slightly excited tone, "Okay." Then, Helen turned around, took a deep breath, and shouted loudly, "Everyone listen to my orders. Now, line up in front of Master Lin En." When Helen was able to stand until the last moment, the other 9,999 children had no resentment in their hearts. Helen, who looked so thin and even vulnerable, was able to stand to the end, which already explained a lot of things. So at this moment, these children, while following Helen's orders, consciously lined up in front of Lin En in a long line. After 5 minutes, this line of 10,000 people was finally lined up neatly. Helen did not join the team, but stood beside Lin En. Lin En stood in front of the team, looking at the boy at the front of the team, and slowly said, "Come here." Although the boy did not know what Lin En was going to do, the look on his face was still extremely excited. Duh. 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 He took 2 quick steps and walked in front of Lin En, raised his head and looked straight at Lin En. At this time, Lin En also spoke to the NEAT team. "Now, I will engrave the life wheel for you, so that you have real combat ability." As soon as these words came out, the whole audience was in an uproar. What? Engrave the life wheel? I have never heard of such a thing. Isn't the will of life able to awaken on its own? Is there any other way to awaken a person's will of life? This is impossible. At the same time as the discussion broke out, Lin En also stretched out a hand and placed it on the forehead of the child in the front row. The next moment, a strong fiery red light flashed in the child's body, and a hot breath swept around with the child as the center. Huh! A violent flame began to emerge from the child's body, and in an instant his entire body was wrapped in flames. At the same time, a red wheel of life with complicated flame runes appeared from the child's body. This is the top-level flame wheel of life. Helen, who was standing next to Lin En, looked at the wheel of life the moment the flame wheel of life appeared. Her blue eyes were all turned red by the flame wheel of life, and her long golden hair turned orange under the wheel of life. Her eyes were filled with extreme astonishment and shock, and even her small mouth opened wide. She subconsciously raised a hand and gently covered her mouth. Huff! Huff! Helen's breathing became more rapid, and her chest rose and fell. Top, flame fate wheel. My God! Master Lin En actually forced others to have the fate wheel. And it was the top-level fate wheel. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 324. Helen herself has a very good talent, and her family background can be called upper class. Living in this environment, she has seen many people who are called geniuses. But although these people are not called geniuses, there are very few people who have a life wheel like the one that appears in front of her now. So she knows very well in her heart how rare and terrifying a top-level life wheel is. Gurgle. After swallowing a mouthful of saliva gently, Helen's state was adjusted to normal, but her eyes were still looking at the top-level flaming life wheel, and she couldn't help but murmured in a low voice. Master Lin En. Simply. Anything is possible. This is a real top-level life wheel. It was actually created by Master Lin En. Then. Master Lin En with such means. Even if he is called the creator. There is no exaggeration at all. Master Lin En really can do anything. A few seconds later, the top-level flame fate wheel returned to the child's body, and the flames and the scorching breath that spread to the surroundings disappeared in an instant. The child slowly opened his eyes, his face filled with ecstasy, and he danced like crazy, cheering. Great! My fate wheel has really awakened. And it's the top-level flame fate wheel. At that time, the children who were lining up looked at Lin En with their eyes wide open. In these eyes, there was a strong sense of shock that could not be concealed at all. And then, there was a round of exclamations like a tsunami. Oh my God! Lord Lin En was not kidding. He really did it, forcing a person to have a life wheel. And he has the best life wheel. This method is too terrible. Lord Lin En can produce geniuses indefinitely. It's terrifying to think about it. This kind of power can be said to be against the will of heaven. Lin En looked at the first child who awakened the life wheel, and said in a flat tone. You stay aside first. Get familiar with the life wheel that is awakened now. After everyone awakens, I will arrange for you to go to actual combat. The child nodded vigorously, and then quickly left Lin En. He went to an open area and began to adapt to his latest power. When the child left, Lin En's eyes once again returned to the long line. After a rough glance, he said again. Next. Then, the second child in line walked in front of Lin En. Lin En reached out his hand again and touched the forehead of the child. The wheel of life emerged, thunder and lightning struck. Blue light bloomed. The top-level thunder wheel of life, engraved. The moment the child woke up, Lin En sent the child away. After that, Lin En made every child he chose awaken the top-level wheel of life. Ice wheel of life, sharp wheel of life, suspended wheel of life, wind wheel of life. Various top-level wheels of life were engraved in the bodies of these children. The moment these children possessed the top-level will of life, the strength of this army had been greatly improved. The only thing they lacked in the end was to hone their own strength in actual combat. Until the last person in the team had their will of life engraved, only Helen and Lin-En were left. Helen raised her head, her two blue eyes were full of expectations, staring at Lin-En. She knew very well that Lin-En would engrave the will of life on her now. At the same time, Lin-En's eyes also looked towards Helen. "Helen, get ready," Lin-En said softly. Helen nodded heavily, and the fists hanging on both sides of her body were clenched tightly. "Okay." The next moment, Lin-En raised his hand and pointed his finger at Helen's forehead. In an instant, Helen's body underwent a new change. Her originally petite body actually grew a little bigger at this moment. The originally loose and soft arms became tense, and perfect lines and curves appeared everywhere in her body. A will of life also appeared in Helen's body. The moment she noticed the will of life in her body, Helen suddenly opened her eyes, and she subconsciously clenched her fists and punched the ground hard. Boom! With just one punch, a huge deep pit appeared on the ground. Helen looked at her intact fist and exclaimed with joy. "So, my life wheel is the top power life wheel." Then, Helen was ready to leave here and look for the person who awakened the life wheel before her. But at this time, Lin-En suddenly spoke. "Don't go there yet, Helen." After hearing this, Helen stopped and looked at Lin-En with some doubts. Lin-En continued. "You are the one who stood at the end just now. This has proved your specialness. So I will engrave another life wheel for you." Helen did not react for a while. She just looked at Lin-En with a slightly surprised expression, and her brain seemed to stop turning. What? The second life wheel? How is it possible? Just one top-level life wheel is precious to a terrifying degree. There are only a handful of people who have two top-level life wheels, even among all the people in the world. Could it be that Lord Lin-En can do such a thing? And just when Helen had not reacted yet, Lin-En had already stretched out a hand again and gently touched Helen's forehead. Another brand new top-level life wheel appeared in Helen's body. In an instant, Helen felt that everything around her became full, even the breeze became very slow, and she could even see the traces of airflow. At this moment, she understood that there was indeed a second top-level life wheel in her body. Gurgle. Her throat moved, and she swallowed the saliva that was madly secreted from her mouth into her stomach. How is this possible? Lord Lin-En actually created two life wheels. And they are two top-level life wheels. With these two top-level life wheels, even compared with those famous geniuses, they can completely crush those geniuses. It's really incredible. Someone can force others to have multiple top-level life wheels. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 325. The two life wheels that Lin-En engraved in Helen's body are the top power life wheel and the top speed life wheel. When he saw that it was Helen, who stood out with a petite body among 10,000 people, he had already made such a decision in his heart. When she had no fighting ability, Helen had such an excellent fighting instinct. Only by giving her the purest power can Helen's potential be fully tapped. Among the numerous life wheels, the top power life wheel and the top speed life wheel are the two top life wheels that are most suitable for Helen. When Helen has completely mastered these two top life wheels, Lin-En will consider again and give Helen a new life wheel. After a long time, Helen came back from the shock. She looked at Lin-En and said excitedly, "Thank you, Lord Lin-En." Lin-En just nodded lightly and said to Helen, "Go and bring the others back here." After hearing this, Helen left Lin-En and called back those who were adapting to their own strength. A minute later, these people once again lined up in an orderly queue and appeared in front of Lin-En. They all looked at Lin-En in admiration without saying a word. Lin-En looked at the scene calmly, and his mouth slowly opened. Now, I just engraved a top-level life wheel for you. This is just the beginning. In the future, I will give you other different life wheels according to your different performances. Just like Helen, the winner this time, she already has 2 top-level life wheels. When Lin An said this, Helen, who was standing next to him, also showed the 2 top-level life wheels in her body. Everyone saw Helen's top-level power life wheel and top-level speed life wheel. Oh my god! She actually has 2 top-level life wheels. This is too incredible. What kind of power does it take to be able to do such a thing like Lord Lin En? Being able to be Lord Lin En's subordinate has simply exhausted my luck in my life. It's so exciting. I also want to have other top-level life wheels. Lin En dismissed his men again and let them hone their strength with each other. His body quickly floated in the sky and disappeared from the sight of the 10,000 children. Then, Lin En looked around in the Zhu domain. Now it's time to let these guys feel the real battlefield. Now the 10,000 children he selected do have a certain degree of power, but they do not have the qualities that a warrior should have in other aspects. Lin En looked in the direction of the Tree of Life, and at the same time, the will of heaven in his body turned, and the power of the law of space was fully released at this moment. In an instant, it established a connection with the 5,000 abyss small worlds that had been snatched from the hands of the abyss demon god. At the same time, these 5,000 abyss small worlds disappeared from the sky above the Tree of Life in the blink of an eye. Boom! 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 The next moment, the space of the entire sky vibrated. These 5,000 small worlds shuttled through space again and again, approaching where Lin En was. The vibration of space became more and more intense as the 5,000 small worlds shuttled through space. In the border of Zhu, this uninhabited place, it was even more obvious. Among the 10,000 children, there were also several who were given the top space life wheel. At this moment, these children with the top space life wheel looked at the distant sky at the same time. Their eyes became extremely solemn, and their bodies stood stiffly on the ground, ignoring the chaotic attacks around them, and even cold sweat began to flow down their foreheads. Helen, who was fighting with others, also noticed this abnormal situation. She immediately said, "Stop first. Something special happened." After that, she went directly to the side of the top space life wheel owners, frowned, and asked hurriedly, "What happened over there?" One person came back to his senses in an instant, raised a hand, pointed in the direction of the Tree of Life, and answered Helen. "I felt it through the space life wheel. From the space over there. Something terrible is approaching rapidly." Helen's expression became more serious at this moment. She stared at that direction, and her brows were frowning more and more. And just a few seconds later, the 5,000 small worlds appeared in Helen's sight. She saw directly that in these 5,000 abyss small worlds, the abyss demons were constantly showing their fangs and claws. The fierce appearance of those demons made these children who had never experienced killing feel waves of fear. Then came a series of solemn exclamations. "Oh no! The enemy is attacking. Didn't Lord Lin En completely kill the abyss demon? Where is Lord Lin En? Where is he? So scary, those demons are so scary." The 5,000 small worlds didn't stop until they were suspended right above the heads of these children. The power of the 2 top life wheels in Helen's body was violently activated at this moment. She looked at the 5,000 abyss small worlds. Although she felt uneasy in her heart, she still forced herself to show a firm look. "Everyone, get ready for battle. Helen is the person in charge of this group of people for the time being. When Lin En is not here, she needs to stand up." And at this time, Lin En also slowly emerged from the sky. He looked at the 5,000 abyss small worlds surrounding the sky with a calm look, and then directly said to the people below, "From now on, these 5,000 small worlds are where you will practice." After that, Lin En didn't care about how others would react, and directly tore a piece of space and entered one of the abyss small worlds. At the same time, the moment Lin An said this world fell into an extremely strange silence, and even the sound of a breeze blowing could be heard clearly. Buzz. Helen's mind instantly entered a state of chaos. She raised her head and looked at the 5,000 abyss worlds with a dazed look. The tense body became even more stiff at this moment, and she said in a stuttering tone. Are you kidding? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 326. Helen's blue eyes stared at the sky. The 5,000 abyss worlds were suspended high in the air, and there were a huge number of hideous demons in them. She could even hear the roars coming from these 5,000 small worlds. Huh. Helen took a deep breath and looked at the sky without blinking. There was a strong surprise in her pupils. She couldn't believe what she saw. Use these 5,000 worlds as a place for training. Lord Lin En, are you serious? These are 5,000 small worlds. They were actually used as a place for trial. Lord Lin En's move was too big. In each of these abyss worlds, there is a Lord of the Abyss, and these Lords of the Abyss are all the Lord of the Abyss. At this moment, the Lord of the Abyss has been destroyed, and they have begun to rule their own worlds. At the same time, Lin En had already appeared in one of the small worlds. The moment he appeared in the Abyss world, all the Abyss demons in this small world immediately looked at Lin En. The Lord of the Abyss in this world, Jerof, is the most powerful of the Lords of the Abyss under the Abyss demon. At this moment, Jerof widened his eyes filled with murderous aura and looked at Lin En with a fierce look. It opened its mouth full of bloody fangs, flapped its black wings behind it, and flew in the sky. Who is it? Dare to break into my world? As he said that, he had already appeared in front of Lin En, looking at Lin En with some anger. It was extremely disrespectful to him to rashly enter his small world without his consent. The Abyss Lords didn't know much about the battle between Lin En and the Abyss Demon God that day, because when their 10,000 Abyss small worlds reached the border of Zhu, 5,000 of them exploded directly. The remaining 5,000 small worlds were directly hung by Lin En above Zhu, and the space law was used to prevent the Abyss demons inside from coming out. So they didn't know who killed the Abyss Demon God at the beginning. They subconsciously thought that the person who killed the Abyss Demon God was some of the stronger ones who had awakened from their other enemy camps. And the moment he appeared in front of Lin En's eyes also fell on Jerof. He said indifferently, "Are you responsible for ruling this small world?" Jerof frowned tightly. Although he didn't know what Lin En meant by this question, he still answered, "It's me." Then he continued to ask, "Who are you? What do you want to do by suddenly coming to my world?" Jerof didn't attack Lin En directly. There was a reason why he could become the master of this abyss world. Just when he was staring at Lin En slowly said again, "From today on, this small world belongs to me." Immediately, Jerof fell into a state of rage. "What? You are simply looking for death." The next moment, Jerof flapped his wings behind him, waved his claws, and attacked Lin En directly. Death cut. Jerof's claws waved hundreds of times at a time, and each time he waved, several claw marks would be produced. Countless claw marks occupied the entire sky in an instant, as fast as a meteor across the night sky, and spread quickly towards where Lin En was. The floating clouds in the sky were cut into tiny clouds as thin as hair, and even the strong wind blowing in the air was easily offset by the claw marks. At this time, all the demons in this abyss world focused their attention on Jerof and Lin En. Lord Jerof is so decisive. He used the strongest killing move right at the beginning. That invader is going to be unlucky this time. Lord Jerof is fully capable of becoming the new Abyss Demon God. Even Jerof's eyes when he looked at Lin En showed a hint of pride. His intuition told him that Lin En, who came to the abyss world, must have a very high status. If he kills this person, his reputation will become even greater in the remaining 5,000 abyssal worlds. It will be easier for him to unify these abyssal worlds. Lin En looked at the claw marks that completely occupied a large area of the sky, and his cold brows could not help but wrinkle slightly, and a hint of coldness crept up on his face. He shook his head gently and said in a cold tone, "Since we can't negotiate in a friendly manner, then I can only." Suppressed violently. When Lin En finished speaking, he slowly raised one arm, stretched out a finger, and pointed straight ahead. Break. At the same time, light shone in his eyes, and the will of heaven in his body turned rapidly. Cra la la. The next moment, the airspace in this abyss world was shattered, like a mirror that was hit violently, and shattered into countless pieces. There was no place in the sky of millions of miles. And those claw marks occupying the sky were completely swallowed up by the broken sky in an instant. Looking at this dreamlike scene, Jerof's eyes widened uncontrollably, and even almost jumped out of his eye sockets, and large beads of sweat oozed out of his forehead. How is it possible? One finger. Just one finger. The whole sky was destroyed. Even the Abyss Demon Lord who has mastered the laws of space cannot do this at all. And just as Jerof was in a daze for a moment, Lin En took a step forward and completely disappeared from the sky. When he appeared again, he appeared in front of Jerof. Along with Lin En, there was also the powerful aura emanating from Lin En. This aura completely enveloped Jerof in less than a breath. At this moment, Jerof's body became completely stiff, and the sweat beads on his forehead had a tendency to condense faintly. A chill that could freeze the soul filled his heart. The sky continued to collapse, and the entire sky fell into chaos. Lin En looked at Jerof, who was less than half a meter away from him, and slowly said, "I say that from today on, this little world belongs to me. Do you have any objections? I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 327. After saying these two sentences, Lin stopped talking and focused all his attention on Jerof. His eyes were still filled with that chill that seemed to be able to freeze a person's soul. Jerof looked at Lin, fear constantly gathering in his eyes, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Gilug. Gilug. After swallowing 2 large mouthfuls of saliva into his stomach, Jerof's dry throat was slightly moistened, and his ability to speak was somewhat restored. He spoke in a trembling voice. "No. No. I have no objections." After seeing the tip of the iceberg of Lin En's strength, Jerof wisely chose to bow his head. His keen intuition told him that if he continued, he would definitely die. Although Jerof's voice was not high-pitched, it was still heard by many abyss demons below. Seeing this scene and hearing these timid words, they were all stunned. What? Lord Jerof? He actually lowered his head. The person opposite is so powerful. After hearing Jerof's answer, Lin's eyes slowly moved away from Jerof's body. At this moment, the huge pressure that enveloped Jerof and made him feel suffocated completely dissipated. Boom! Jerof's body softened and he fell from the sky to the ground. His extremely pale face was filled with the joy of surviving the disaster. Call! Call! Jerof gasped loudly. I'm still alive. This person's strength. So powerful. Lin En looked at the dazed and motionless demons below, and he felt helpless in his heart. He originally entered these small abyss worlds because he wanted to have a good discussion and let his army come in for training. But the demons in the small world of the abyss did not give him this chance to be nice. He had no choice but to take action and resort to violent suppression. In fact, he is a kind person at heart. The mysterious color in Lin En's eyes dissipated, and the sky, which had been shattered into ruins, returned to its original state in an instant. He looked towards the horizon, across a long distance, and looked into other small abyss worlds. Lin turned his back to Jareth and slowly asked, "Among these 5,000 small worlds, who is the strongest?" Jareth lowered his eyes, not daring to look directly at Lin An's back. He replied with a trembling tone, "That's me." Hearing this answer, Lin's brows couldn't help but frown. The reason why he didn't kill Jareth, by the way, was not because he had a compassionate heart. And he was going to leave Jareth to his army and let his army grow in the battle. After thinking for a few seconds, Lin An slowly shook his head and said helplessly, "Barely enough. I originally thought that there would be some very powerful beings among these 5,000 small worlds. But I didn't expect. The strongest one was actually this one, Jareth, who was almost killed by his finger. From today on, you are the manager of these 5,000 small worlds. After that, my subordinates will come to these 5,000 small worlds for training. You can let the demons in these small worlds attack them without showing any mercy. But if any of my subordinates dies in these 5,000 small worlds, I will destroy your 5,000 small worlds. You'd better restrain them." Jareth lowered his head, his expression became more bitter as Lin's words came out, and the fear in his eyes became more intense. The cold hairs on the body stood on end, and the wings on the back hung feebly. "Ming, understand. It turns out. His purpose is so terrible. Actually, the small world of the Abyss, which was famous in the Age of the Abyss. It was used as a place for training for subordinates. No one has ever done this before." Even though Jareth was filled with reluctance, he didn't dare to say a word. Because he knew that if he was not willing at all, his head would be separated from his body. Lin An waved his right hand lightly, and the power of space laws that originally appeared in these 5,000 abyss small worlds directly dissipated. The power that blocked the small world of the abyss from communicating with each other was completely lifted. Lin An said without looking back, "Inform the other abyss demons in other small worlds as soon as possible." Clatter. Clatter. Then, Lin An took a step forward and disappeared from this space. It wasn't until Lin disappeared for a full minute that Jareth, who was hanging his head behind Lin, mustered up the courage to lift his head. Call. When he felt that Lin An's breath had completely disappeared from this world, he let out a long breath of depression that he had been holding in for a long time. Then he immediately stood up and said to the large group of stunned abyss demons behind him, "Everyone, follow me. Let's go to the small world next to it. Convey the request of this lord. If they accept, then it's easy to say. But if they don't accept, then we have to force them to accept it. Everything is for survival." Jareth has a strong desire to survive in his heart, and he has made a decision. The abyss demons who heard his order also began to prepare for the battle, but there are still some demons who don't know the situation and are discussing in doubt. Is it necessary to do this? He is just a human. If our 5,000 small worlds unite together, we can definitely kill him. That's right, how can we surrender to a human? After hearing these discussions, Jareth frowned tightly, and a trace of fear appeared in his eyes. A few seconds later, seeing that there was no big movement, he relaxed his tense heart. Fortunately, I didn't anger that man. The next moment, he flapped his wings and flew to the side of the abyss demons who were talking. The sharp claws swung vigorously. Whoosh! The heads of these demons were chopped off and fell to the ground. Jareth took the heads of the 3 demons in his hands, flapped his wings and flew high in the sky. He said loudly in a solemn voice, "Everyone listen to me. If you want to live longer, follow the orders of that man. Otherwise, all of us abyss demons will die. I can hear that the man is not kidding us. He really has such strength. The strength he showed when he crushed me just now is just the tip of the iceberg of his strength. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 328. All the abyss demons, after hearing Zhirluf's solemn words, were speechless. They all understood that Lin An's strength was beyond their imagination. Zhirluf took all the demons in this abyss world to other small worlds and began to run around frantically to save their lives. Zhirluf would persuade those who could be persuaded, and would kill those who could not be persuaded. In the abyss world of Madfuk, Zhirluf's friend, Madfuk looked at Zhirluf, frowned and asked, "Zhirluf, are you crazy? You actually did this." But Zhirluf just looked at Madfuk with indifference, sneered, and said, "Madfuk, I don't want to do this either. But there is a human who is more powerful than the Lord of the Abyss Demon, who ordered me to do this. If I don't do this, all of us Abyss Demons will die." Madfuk was stunned and said in astonishment, "What? A human who is more powerful than the Lord of the Abyss Demon?" Zhirluf nodded heavily. "You heard it right." Madfuk looked at Zhirluf's serious expression and didn't know what to do for a while. "Actually, is it true? My God! A human who is more powerful than the Lord of the Abyss Demon? It's hard to imagine how powerful it will be." As Zhirluf's strength grew, these 5,000 abyss worlds fell into chaos. While this was going on, Lin An's figure once again appeared in the sight of Helen and others. Helen and others all remained quiet, silently looking at Lin An, waiting for Lin An's arrangement for them. Lin An just glanced at Helen and others below, then retracted his gaze and looked at the 5,000 abyss worlds in the sky where abyss demons were flying everywhere. On his face, the thought emerged instantly. After thinking for more than 10 seconds, Lin An slowly returned to normal. It is not enough to have a battlefield for actual combat. We also need some training grounds specifically for them to speed up their strength improvement. After thinking of this, the heavens will in Lin An's body once again turned wildly, and his purple eyes bloomed with brighter colors. The law of time. At this moment, the most mysterious law of time in the world spread out from Lin's body. Everything around Lin stopped moving. The floating clouds in the sky stopped in place, the whistling wind stopped moving, and even the air that was constantly flowing stopped flowing at this moment. At the same time, all the time flows in the 5,000 abyss worlds floating in the sky were forcibly stopped. Zhirluf and Madfuko's bodies stopped in mid-air, motionless, and even their heartbeats and breathing stopped completely. All of this was like a still oil painting. The only ones who were not affected were Lin and Helen and others who were avoided by Lin. Lin sat cross-legged in the space, and his left hand controlled the invisible time force to condense together the law of space. At the same time, his right hand controlled another invisible space force. The space around him that was stopped began to distort constantly. The power of the law of time is merging with the power of the law of space. The entire universe has been greatly affected. The rotating planets have stopped, and the spreading sunlight has stopped spreading. Even the second spiritual revival of the earth has slowed down a little. With the continuous fusion of these two laws, the prototypes of small worlds have been created by Lin An. Helen on the ground looked up at Lin An in the sky. She saw the scene that seemed like a still picture and the scene of space distortion. Buzz. Immediately, a buzzing sounded in her mind, and her whole mind seemed to be completely overturned, and she felt a wave of dizziness. Those two blue eyes have been widened by her, like two bright light bulbs. This power. The power of space. The power of time. These two most mysterious and rare powers in the world. Lord Lin An has mastered them perfectly. He is really strong. After being in a daze for a long time, Helen finally looked towards the place where space and time were merging. In her heart, strong doubts arose. Master Lin An, he. What does he want to do? Suddenly, Helen's mind seemed to think of some terrible possibility. Could it be that Master Lin An? He wanted to create a world where the flow of time was completely different from that of the Kyushu realm? Is this really possible? Helen couldn't believe this guess in her heart. Time passed by minute, although the people present could not feel the passage of time. But they could see that the time and space around Lin En had become larger. Even Lin En's figure was completely swallowed by time and space and disappeared from everyone's sight. At this moment, Lin En's left and right hands were tightly clasped together, and the power of the space law and the power of the time law used by him had been perfectly integrated together. Around his body, 10 small worlds as big as the sunrise country were floating. Lin En's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and a hint of joy flashed in his plain eyes. Finally done. A small world with 50 times the flow rate. At this moment, all the stopped time resumed. The sun's rays continued to spread, the planet rotated again, and the Earth's spiritual energy recovered and returned to normal. White clouds floated in the sky, the whistling wind, and the flowing gas all returned to normal. The 5,000 abyss worlds once again fell into chaos. At the same time, Lin En also brought the 10 worlds he created and once again appeared in the sight of Helen and others. His body slowly landed on the ground, and the 10 worlds as big as the sunrise. Following Lin En closely, they floated around Lin En's body. Lin En raised a hand and gently pointed to the 10 worlds behind him, and then said with a faint smile, "These 10 worlds I created. The speed of time flow in them is 50 times that of the Jiuzhu domain. You will practice in these 10 worlds in the future. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things." Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 329. The moment Lin En finished speaking, Helen and the others looked towards the 10 transparent small worlds. 50 times the speed of time. If you practice in it, wouldn't your strength also increase at a speed of 50 times? An aura that was incompatible with the entire Jiuzhu domain was constantly emanating from the 10 small worlds behind Lin En. The time and space around these 10 small worlds were all in a distorted state, as if being swallowed by a black hole. At the same time, the 10 small worlds created by Lin En, which had a 50-fold acceleration, were slowly descending downwards. In just a few seconds, these 10 50-fold speed small worlds were infinitely close to the ground. At this time, Lin En chuckled again and said, "Now, you can go in and experience it first. After the training battlefield is arranged, you can arrange it freely. Whether you choose to practice or train, it's up to you. My only request to you is to get stronger by any means." Helen and others listened to Lin En's words, and their expressions became solemn. Although they didn't know what the situation of Jiuzhu domain was now, they didn't know much. But they could be sure that the current situation of Jiuzhu domain was definitely not optimistic. And the only way to alleviate this dangerous situation was to keep getting stronger. To get stronger by any means and fearlessly. "Lord Lin En, we understand." After a few seconds of silence, Helen and others answered in unison. Lin En nodded gently. Snap. Then, he snapped his fingers with his right hand. The next moment, the space in front of Lin En shattered, and a space channel was created. This space channel is the channel leading to the 10 small worlds with a flow rate of 50 times. As for which small world they will enter, it is completely random. Helen and others did not waste any time. They lined up directly and walked into the space channel one by one. Although there are 10,000 people here, the space channel created by Lin En is enough to accommodate about 100 people at a time. The flow of people surged, and one by one, the children selected by Lin En entered the 10 small worlds with a flow rate of 50 times. Helen was still the last one in the line. After everyone entered the space channel, she turned her head and looked at Lin En, who was standing aside with a calm face. The white little fists hanging on both sides of her body were clenched tightly, and the tender and pretty face showed an extremely firm look. Helen lowered her voice and said to herself. Come on. Helen. You must work hard to become stronger. In order to protect the Zhu domain. And I absolutely cannot let Master Lin An down. Ta. After strengthening her faith in her heart, Helen took a big step forward and entered the space channel. The next moment, Helen appeared in one of the small worlds. Everything around her became completely different. Helen looked at the things outside this small world, and everything was moving very slowly. Everything she saw in the 9 provinces, the white clouds, the abyss demons, and the majestic wind, were moving at the speed of an ant. Is this the time with 50 times the speed of time? Incredible. Duh. 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 Helen continued to take firm steps, step by step into this world. At the same time, her clenched fist was still shaking with excitement. With this kind of training environment, even a person with ordinary talent can also grow quickly to be a strong man who can suppress one side. After all, the selected children entered the 10 small worlds with accelerated time and began to practice. Lin An did not stay by the side. He went to the 5,000 abyss worlds again. After about 100 abyss masters were killed, these 5,000 abyss worlds have stood in a united front. They all chose to surrender to Lin An and willingly became the training battlefield for the children chosen by Lin An. Although they knew that this would cause great damage, it was better than total destruction. When Lin An came out of the 5,000 abyss worlds again, it was already an hour later. He appeared on an open space, slowly turned around, and looked at the time training field and the abyss training battlefield that he had arranged. Huh. After a long breath, Lin An retracted his gaze again. Now there is Daiyi's army and my army in Zhu territory. As long as they grow up, even if they face the army of the ancient strongmen who have revived from their slumber after the earth is revived, they can be regarded as having the strength to fight. But this can only resist those armies. As for the peak combat power, it is not enough. Lin An paused here. After pausing for a few seconds, Lin An's eyes suddenly became serious, and he sighed with a solemn tone. I must also enter the state of retreat. My strength is still a little weak now. After shaking his head gently, Lin An waved his hand to tear the space and disappeared in this battlefield. The next moment, Lin An appeared at the location of the Tree of Life, and Daiyi was still staying here. He appeared beside Daiyi, pointed in the direction where he was just now, and said calmly. I created a place suitable for training and experience there. Wait until all your men are familiar with it, then go there. Daiyi looked at Lin An and nodded heavily. Understood. Captain Lin An. Lin An disappeared again, and when he appeared again, he appeared at the top of the Tree of Life. Chen Daoming, who felt Lin An's breath, walked out of the house and went to Lin An's side. Lin An said directly. Chen Daoming, I'm going to retreat. I will retreat for a very long time this time. During the time of my retreat, Zhu domain will be completely handed over to your control. Chen Daoming looked at Lin An. He wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say it, just looked at Lin An deeply, and grinned. Leave it to me. After that, Lin An left. He tore the space several times and went to a Jedi abyss in Zhu domain. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Lin An inserted the white sword into the ground beside him and said softly. Retreat begins. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 330. After Lin An transferred Zhu domain to space, it had lost a lot of things. But after Lin An perfectly copied and engraved the laws of the earth, the Zhu domain floating in the sky was no different from when it was on earth. Day and night would still alternate, and spring, summer, autumn and winter would still change. Winter went and spring came, the sun rose and the snow melted, and all things grew. Unknowingly, Lin An had been in seclusion for 3 years. And on the day when Lin An had been in seclusion for 3 whole years, The second spiritual revival of the Earth finally stopped completely. Now the Earth has become very big, and the entire solar system can no longer accommodate the Earth. Even the Sun has become a satellite revolving around the Earth. This is the original appearance of the Earth. The second spiritual revival of the Earth completely restored the Earth to its most prosperous time. Everything inside the Earth has changed. And just a few days after the Earth stopped expanding and stabilized, the pattern of the Earth had been completely reshuffled. In the Zhuzhu area, Chen Daoming stood at the top of the Tree of Life, looking at everything in the Zhuzhu area. After Lin En began to retreat, he took over what Lin En was doing before and began to guard the Zhuzhu area. Lin En, how long will he retreat? Chen Daoming was helpless. He managed the Zhuzhu area that carried all mankind for 3 years, and spent a lot of energy during this period. After shaking his head helplessly, Chen Daoming looked in the direction of the Earth. This is a habit of his. He would look at the Earth every day, the hometown that he missed. The distance between the Earth and the Zhuzhu area is still the same. Because the volume of the Earth is countless times larger, it becomes very clear and visible. Even in the Zhuzhu area, you can clearly see part of the Earth. The people of the Zhuzhu area spend every day looking at the Earth. But at the moment when Chen Daoming looked at the Earth this time, his pupils widened in an instant, and a look of astonishment appeared on his somewhat haggard face. What is that? He only saw a huge monster approaching from the direction of the Earth. A bad feeling quickly rose in Chen Daoming's heart. He immediately forcibly tore open one space channel after another, stepped into it regardless of anything, and disappeared from the top of the Tree of Life. When he appeared again, he had already appeared at the edge of the Zhuzhu domain closest to the Earth. At this time, his eyes seemed to penetrate countless dark voids, and he saw the huge monster attacking the Zhuzhu domain from the Earth clearly. This is whose palm? In the direction of the Earth facing the Zhuzhu domain. What attacked was a huge palm that seemed to cover the entire sky. This huge hand directly tore through countless cosmic voids and quickly approached the Zhuzhu domain. Boom! 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 Dozens of small planets blocked the Earth and the Zhuzhu domain, but these small planets were easily crushed and turned into countless dust fragments at the moment they were touched by this huge hand, wandering alone in the universe. At the same time, the voids passed by this hand were also shattered, and small black holes were rapidly generated. Chen Daoming, who was standing on the edge of the Zhuzhu domain, frowned tightly after seeing the huge power of this hand. The look in his pupils was extremely solemn, and even a few drops of cold sweat penetrated his forehead uncontrollably. What a strong pressure! Feeling the power of the huge hand, Chen Daoming's breathing slowed down a bit. The power contained in this hand is stronger than the power he can control after becoming a demigod. Those ancient great powers finally awakened. And within the few seconds that Chen Daoming was stunned, the huge hand that covered the sky had stretched out and grasped the Zhuzhu domain in its palm. Crack! The huge palm squeezed hard, and the space barrier covering the edge of the Zhuzhu domain appeared with several cracks. Oh no! This palm wants to crush the Zhuzhu domain. At this moment, Chen Daoming reacted instantly, and he immediately flew into the sky, and the power in his body gathered crazily at this moment. He clenched his right fist tightly. The power of the demigod surged violently and continued to flow into his right fist. Chen Daoming's body passed through the distant space and appeared directly under the huge palm, less than 10 meters away. Bang! The punch that accumulated all Chen Daoming's strength was swung by him and blasted towards the palm that wanted to crush the Zhuzhu domain. Crack! 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 Large tracts of space were shattered, and the void of part of the universe began to collapse. But the huge palm that was tightly holding the Zhuzhu domain was not affected much. Only a very small wound appeared, so small that it would not have any impact. Chen Daoming was stunned for a moment. His expression became panic and his face turned pale. Useless. Whose palm is this? The full force of the demigod. It only had such a small effect. At the same time, the huge palm was still holding tightly. Crack! 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 The cracks on the space barrier covering the Zhu domain became more and more numerous, and the space barrier was about to collapse completely. Those who lived in the Zhu domain also saw the big hand covering the entire sky. Immediately, panic began to grow in people's hearts. Oh my God, what is this thing? It's so scary. Help! The monster is coming. I don't want to die. Boom! Boom! Chen Daoming panted violently, and he kept mobilizing the power in his body to bombard the huge palm again and again. But it was just a drop in the bucket after all, and the huge palm was not affected at all. It seemed that to him, Chen Daoming's attack was just a mosquito bite. I am not his opponent. Chen Daoming was full of bitterness, he could only admit such a fact. But even if I die, we must protect the Zhu region. This I promised Lin En. Chen Daoming gritted his teeth fiercely, blood overflowed from the corners of his mouth, and his soul began to burn at this moment. Even if his soul was burned out, he would fight with all his strength. And it was at this time. Lin En, who was in seclusion in the abyss where no one would go. His eyes slowly opened.